The final thing that I wanted to talk to you about was your role and responsibilities when it comes to safeguarding children. I mentioned in a previous video that you need to take responsibility for monitoring and recording things that are worrying or inappropriate, or things that children say to you that either they intend to say, as in if they're making a disclosure to you, or if there's just something that you find worrying or inappropriate. So having access to that pen and paper that we mentioned earlier is absolutely vital. What you need to be thinking about is, if a child makes a disclosure, you need to be writing down as close to word for word as possible what that child is saying to you. And you need to think about the environment. You need to think about that child being in a place where they are free and able to have the conversation that they want to have with you. Additionally, you need to be thinking about worrying or inappropriate injuries. So if there are particular injuries on a child's body, and the NSPCC has fantastic resources that can help you think about what is inappropriate in terms of injuries, bruising, cuts, etc., etc. And different children will have different thresholds, I suppose. And the example I would give is my little boy who plays football. He plays football for 2 different teams. He trains twice a week. He plays games twice a week, and he's basically bruised from the waist downwards. But there's nothing worrying or inappropriate about that. If there were other injuries on his body that were obviously not football related, then that's something that I might want to pay attention to. You need to think about body language and behaviour. Now, what makes something worrying or inappropriate perhaps is a change in a child's body language or behaviour. So you need to understand the children, the pupils that you're working with. You need to be familiar with them and see those changes. So when someone that's usually open and expressive becomes closed, that's perhaps something for you to think about. Children express themselves in the language, they express themselves in the play. And again, if you're just conscious of changes in particular children when it comes to how they're communicating with others, how they're playing with others. Children reveal a lot in the drawing, in the writing, in the drama. Again, being conscious of this is absolutely vital. We've already spoken in the previous video about neglect, so you should be on the lookout for indications of neglect, whether that's medical neglect, nutritional neglect, things that we've spoken about before. So you can see where a child is starting to perhaps suffer from neglect. You might also want to be conscious about the nature and quality of contact with parents. I mean, this is perhaps particularly relevant for primary schools and early years settings, where you get to know the parents actually quite well at drop-off time, at pick-up time. If that relationship changes suddenly for some reason, again, it's something to be conscious of. But your responsibility is to use that pen and paper. It's to note down those concerns that you might have, that disclosure that's been made, that observation that you've just made that's just, something that's worrying you, and pass that information on as soon as possible to your designated safeguarding lead. Okay, so you are not judge, jury, and executioner. You are think of yourself as the middleman, almost the middle person. You're going to write down what you're finding worrying or inappropriate, or anything that a child said in terms of a disclosure, and pass that on as soon as humanly possible to your designated safeguarding lead. Now, their job is to collect that kind of information, and so other teachers in school might be passing other information to them as well about the same child. They collate that and they make the decision about what is to be done next, whether it's going to be a phone call to social services, whether the police need to be involved, whether the health services need to be involved. But that is their decision to make, but they can only make it with a good flow of information from yourselves as teachers. So if a child does make a disclosure to you, these are guidelines from the NSPCC, and they're very, very, very sound. You listen carefully to what they're saying, and you let them know that they've done the right thing by telling you about whatever it is that they want to tell you about. You obviously reassure them that it's not their fault, and you tell them that you're going to take whatever they say seriously. I say obviously, I'm going to say obviously, but it's not always obvious, but you do not confront the alleged abuser. And what you do is you explain what you'll do next, which is going to involve you writing down what they've told you, and you're going to pass it on to another adult who's in a better position to help. And then you do that. You report what the child's told you as soon as possible. It is vitally important that you never promise to keep a secret. And a child might actually say, well, I'm only gonna tell you this if you promise to keep it a secret. You do not promise to keep a secret. You tell them that there are trained professionals who are there to support them, and that it's your duty and your job to let them support that child, to encourage them to support that child. Now, if the child then says, well, I'm not telling you, then equally, your very next step is to write down anything that they have said, the time, the date, as we've already discussed, and you pass the fact that they weren't willing to talk to you any further onto the designated safeguarding lead. So then that person can start to put strategies in place to try and get that child to open up in a different environment. So you need to be recording the pure data about the situation, so the day, the date, the time, the place. You need to record facts. Okay. You can include opinions, but you need to state when something is your opinion. So in this example, when Mum came to collect the child, her breath smelled of alcohol and she was staggering about. They're facts, followed by, in my opinion, she was drunk. Any relevant background information. So you'll remember back in a previous video, we were talking about whether something's abuse or not, and you were thinking about a child attending nursery or primary school in the middle of winter without a coat. So relevant background information is the fact that it's minus 15 degrees outside, or it's the fact that you've watched this child walking unaccompanied for 200 yards down the street before they've got to your school or your setting. Things like that add relevant information to what it is that you're recording. If the child is making a disclosure or has made a comment to you that's aroused your concerns, then you record word for word what the child says, as close to word for word as you possibly can. And always keep any initial notes. So what you're going to do, I mean, what a lot of people do is that they'll find themselves in a situation like this. They'll grab some paper, they'll take notes, and then they'll want to write it up neatly. They might want to type it up before they pass it on to the designated safeguarding lead, which should be done as soon as possible. There's nothing particularly wrong with doing that, but staple your initial notes to the back of the sheet of paper that you pass to the designated safeguarding lead. If you're emailing the designated safeguarding lead, take a photo of your notes and include that on the email, but keep any initial notes, because you never know, there might be something on there that doesn't get transcribed down into your neat copy. An easier way to do it, in fairness, is to just be as thorough as possible when you're taking the initial notes and then pass them straight to your designated safeguarding lead. Just some examples. This is from just to sort of again reiterate how much this kind of thing happens in education. When I got the contract to write the first book about safeguarding, I went into a class of in-service early years teachers. And said to them, we've got this contract to write a book. If anyone would like to be interviewed and to tell us about, some of the experiences that they've had, we could see about writing it into the book, and that'd be a really interesting chapter. And next question: so, has anyone had any experiences? And literally every single person in the classroom put their hands up. And these are some quotes from those early years teachers, and it's just to reiterate this importance of making notes and passing it on. So if you didn't write it down, then it didn't happen. It's that simple. Another one which is really significant in early years, when you think about how important observations are in early years. My colleague hadn't kept good records. There were no details. In fact, there were no records of observations on this child at all. Thing is, you've got your little niggle, their little niggle, someone else's little niggle. It builds up a big picture. But if you didn't log it, it hasn't happened. It's as simple as that. finally, it can become one person's word against another. So staff must safeguard themselves and get things written down when they happen. So just to reiterate then, all this guidance and more can be found in Keeping Children Safe in Education and Working Together to Safeguard Children. These are key documents, really key documents that you need to be aware of moving forward. But as I said in the first movie, make sure that when you get onto placement, when you get into your next job, your first job, your last job, you are looking at and interrogating the safeguarding policy, the child protection policy, so that you know exactly where your responsibilities lie. Thank you.